Legendary.
Iconic.
Seedy.
Acceptance.
Friendship.
Magical.
Certainly an eye-opener.
Margaret from the cloakroom.
Queer as fuck.
Absolutely fucking fabulous.
I remember walking in and thinking, this is just a great club, like it's just great energy. And then when I started to know everyone a bit more, I was like, I'm home.
I just walked in and then my life changed forever, like literally. That's how it was just amazing.
And I just walked in and remember looking at the performances like, whoa.
So I got blind drunk on Pernod and Black, threw up all over my white shirt, and I think I was probably barred on the first day that I went in, but I do remember it vividly. And then, of course, after that, you couldn't get me out of there then.
Oh my God. So, yep, I feel like I found my place.
I remember going there and arriving at the door, and Dave, he was known as, answered the door, and he said, hello, you do know this is a gay club? And I was like, yeah. And he went, I'm going to be watching you.
You open the doors and all of a sudden, boom, 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 the music was, and that was it, wasn't it,
Yeah.
really?
I've been regular at Nightingale for 50 years, ever since the Camp Hill days. Whit Lane, which is my favourite actually, I think maybe because I was at the right age for going out every night, and at Thorpe Street, and eventually here. So 50 years, a long time to be a member of the Nightingale Club.
The Nightingale has been part of my life through all of the emotional roller coaster of the last 30 years.
I think back then it gave you a sense of belonging. You belonged to something, you were part of something. It gave you security, it gave you popularity, it gave you a fantastic circle of friends, and you know, here we are 25, 30 almost years later.
To me, the Nightingale is an icon, realistically. I think it's like a figurehead for like Bone's gay scene. I think it's the driving force, the pioneer in terms of queer nightlife.
A lot of people come through the door with one opinion of themselves, and then when they leave they realise that that's something completely different. It opens you up to new possibilities.
It doesn't matter how high my heels are, how crazy my makeup looks, or if I have glitter all over my face, like no one's gonna judge me and stare at me like I'm an alien. It just felt like this is where I'm meant to be.
The Nightingale was our grinder, wasn't it?
Totally, we're free-spirited.
So there was still this leftoverness of bigotry because it was a criminal offence up until just relatively few years before. So the whole scene was still quite clandestine, but we liked that. We liked the secretiveness of it, you know, the fact that you had to be in the know to get into Nightingale. In fact, you had to know what it was to start with, because there wasn't a big sign up saying the Nightingale Club. The pioneers of the club was Laurie Williams, Derek Pemberton, a couple of us.
Derek was very, you know, you've got this sort of voice who kept you on your toes and wanted to do this and that and the other. Laurie was a typical brummy lad. Hello, Bab, how are you?
So Derek Pemberton had 600 quid, and he said, you can have that. Without that 600 quid, this club, I think, would not be here. It might be a club here, but it wouldn't be the Nightingale. It would not have this history that we're celebrating in this film. It wasn't for Derek Pemberton.
So that's the way it started. The council insisted on a fire exit, which there wasn't one, because it had just been a restaurant. I had to adjust a window on the landing upstairs so that people could get through. I constructed a handrail right to the end of the building, and we sourced some old stairs, wooden stairs from a house, and I nailed it up to the side of the building for people to run down if there's a fire. Thankfully, there was never a fire. The woman there, what was her name?
Oh.
And she used to do the chips with salad cream, and she used to shout through the hatch, chips! Chips!
Camp Hill, all we had was a jukebox, and it was the same sort of jukebox you'd have in the pubs. So they'd have the top 10 on, and a couple of records from the 50s and things.
Of course, disco
hadn't come in.
No, it hadn't. No, that's right.
No, it was just the charts, and people would bring LPs in and play tracks off LPs, and you know that just music, just to keep the whole thing going, really.
Yeah.
We used to do formation dancing, so formation like disco dancing.
Was all that business
And
we
there'd
used
be
to
five,
do?
yeah, there'd be 5 or 6 of us in a line, all doing exactly the same thing, and trying to spin round in flares and platform-sole shoes as well.
We all had a free membership for the first year, which was really quite nice. And then after that, we paid £1, 2 and 6.
Oh my God.
So at that time, it was a full members club with a committee.
Do you remember when we moved in? It was on 2 floors. It was upstairs bar, downstairs bar.
With like a turret on the top, on the corner part.
We used to have this amazing sunken dance floor that you had to walk down to, that was actually sprung as well, so you felt like you were moving on it, and they had this light rig that you'd never be able to get away with today, because it was literally these huge like Sputnik lights used to come down that were like millimeters away from your hair, and everybody used to have big hair in those days that was, you know, hairspray within an inch of its life.
Size-wise, it was probably about the size of this area.
It seemed huge.
And you had a seating area all the way around, 2 sides of it, a DJ booth in the corner, and then the dance floor.
I borrowed a wagon from work on a Saturday morning, took it up to Camp Hill, and we hauled this bar, because it had just been refurbished, hauled this bar out and put it onto this low loader, and there's me going through Birmingham to Whitton with this blooming bar strapped to the back like that. And then we hauled it up into the building and set it in there.
At Whitton Lane, we had a proper disco, and that's when, for me, the music scene, the gay music scene, really took off. In fact, it was a pivotal recording came out in 1974 by a guy called George McCrae. And it was a dance tune. It goes, "Woman, take me in your arms, rock me, baby."
I started at Whitton literally, I think I was doing the Sunday nights, I think a couple of weeks after it had opened. I used to lug LPs and singles in a great big suitcase. In fact, I think my dad used to take me to the club. He'd have no clue what sort of club it was, but he just thought I was there playing records for friends.
And so that's how I became the DJ, because the Monday night became quite successful, so they gave me the Friday and Saturday night slots as well. Paid me £12.50 a night, and I was pleased to get it. We had a stage at Whitman, a staff show. This is where there were the boys from behind the bar, and even Derek from the door would put on a show, and it was absolute scream. Whitton Lane could only hold about 50 people. We squeezed 100 people squeezed in to see the guy to breathe, to see the staff show. It mainly mime and drag, of course, and but I've walked out of those shows in absolute stitches. When the Whitton Lane was getting a little bit left behind, because it's 3 miles out of town, and the scene was opening up around the village now, which is now the village. So the Nightingale was out on a limb somewhere, so it was quite clear that we had to move. It's huge. It used to be a warehouse for anglers, so it was full of nets, and when I went and looked around, it was full of fishing reels and all sorts of smelt of fish and all sorts of strange things. But we hadn't got the money we needed. Some members were taking out second mortgages on their own homes to raise the money to move to Thorpe Street. That's a stunning. That is a real commitment, isn't it? And the other thing we did was life membership. Rather than renew your membership every year, why don't you give us £100? Again, a lot of money in the 70s, £100, and you can have it for life. And all these little tricks and things, we managed to raise the money to not only buy Thorpe Street, but do the conversion as well.
Sourced some pews from a redundant church in Wolverhampton, which I've cut up into pews and made some tables, and that was the restaurant.
We got Quentin Crisp to open the place, and he'd do anything for a few bob and a drink, Quentin, because he just loved the attention, you know.
Thorpe Street started, I actually went in there because I heard you could get poppers there. I remember distinctly walking in and a great big sunken dance floor. The smell of aftershave and men hit you. It wasn't a nasty smell, it was nice. And I just remember seeing the sunken dance floor and all these men that were really butch dancing to Vogue by Madonna. And I think I just stood there, jaw dropped. It was wonderful. It was the first thing I remember about the Nightingale was that, and then running around to the little shop and being shocked by some of the things that they were selling in there. I was, what's that for? Yeah, and then I was hooked. I wanted to go.
Thought Street felt a lot more underground, didn't it? It was just a seedy, it felt like a seedy club. I mean, it was carpeted Thorpe Street, and you could still smoke in the club as well. So you'd be standing next to somebody having a cigarette, and then you'd just drop your cigarette on the floor, tread it in and walk off. I mean, in the daylight, that carpet, just how it ever didn't just burn down and we didn't all just die in there was an absolute miracle.
All of the bars were either downstairs or, you know, no glass frontages, and as like Lawrence said, both the Nightingale Thorpe Street and Tintin's slightly later had little peephole doors that the door staff used to look through to see if you looked gay enough before they let you in. And of course, it was, for me, late 80s, 88, 89. It was at a time when newspapers like The Sun were carrying headlines like the gay plague to describe the AIDS crisis that we were all living in. So there was this natural fear initially about, you know, your health and the people that you knew and their health. And slightly later on came Section 28, which people have probably spoken about before, which was, you know, an oppressive piece of legislation that we all experienced in one way or another around that time. Everything was covert and undercover until you got to spaces like the Nightingale Club, where you really had that unique experience then of being who you truly were.
The skimpy outfits were hidden underneath, so you kind of dressed in a shirt and trousers and tried to fit in with society before you got to the actual club itself, and then it'd be rip them off, and then you'd start behaving outrageously camp and think you could be who you want to be expressive, and you know, the real personalities came out.
Yes.
And of course then there was no social media, no mobile telephones. If you wanted to see someone, you had to get down to the club. So the relationships and the atmosphere in the clubs were built on people getting to know one another. It really did have that family sense.
Yes.
As you walked in, for some reason they thought they'd try an ice cream machine, and they sold out continuously. We used to play how much of the Magnum you can get in without cracking the chocolate. But that's gay boys for you.
It was like a different world.
It was quite vast as well, wasn't it? Because there was lots of little rooms. There was like a members' lounge upstairs. There was a courtyard bar when you first went in. Alongside that was a restaurant, wasn't there?
And the cage in the corner.
Yes, yeah.
Where the boys used to dance.
There even used to be a small little tiny clone zone shop, which could have possibly been one of the first ever clone zone shops that used to sell sort of peculiar little sex toys that we weren't familiar with at the time, and greeting cards.
They didn't like girls going in. You couldn't become a member back in those days, so it was quite awkward that we'd almost have to hang around, get speaking to guys in the Jester, the gay guys, who asking them to sign you in.
It's mind-boggling to me. For that exact reason, because of how welcomed I felt when I came here, to imagine there was ever a time when that wouldn't have been the case and I would have been turned away. Crazy.
So we discovered this little group for lesbians that used to meet in the Holloway Head, and it was run by one of the first people that set up the Nightingale, who was a male to female transsexual. It was very protocol, so you found the advert in the Gay Times, you then had to phone the number on the advert, and then they then eventually told you where the venue was.
It was a difficult time to try and convince, and eventually Angela appeared on the committee, and I said, oh, we've got a lesbian at last, we might get women in. And then one day I got bothered at the DJ box, like I did, thank God we had Perspex. And this girl came to bother me, and she was beautiful, and I said, would you want a record? She went, I want to be a DJ, and I went, I don't know any female DJs. I went, oh, all right then. I said, you're very pretty though. I said, are you sure you're a lesbian? Because of course we all had that stereotyped thought in our heads.
So she introduced herself as Corey, and she came in the DJ box with me, much to the consternation of some of the older members. Well, what's that girl doing in there?
So I remember going to HMV, I'd borrowed some money off my mum, going to HMV, buying the entire top 30 on 7-inch vinyl, and turning up to the Nightingale and literally just playing one after the other. And it was back in the day when Shaggy and Chakademus and Pliers and all bands like that were on. So it wasn't anything that the Nightingale had ever heard before, but it just took off straight away. And I'd still say that the Birmingham gay scene really does embrace different cultures of music, music that you wouldn't necessarily hear in gay bars in London or Manchester, say.
So that was the start of what we politely called the female invasion, which I'm glad. I'm thrilled to bits that it happened, because we finally got more balance in the club.
And then eventually times changed and girls could become members.
The most important move the club did from the day it opened as a gay club was that meeting at Thorpe Street, where they opened up the venue to trans people.
The old Nightingale at Thorpe Street, which was next to the Hippodrome, would of course always attract the theatre crowd. So you'd always have the likes of Wayne Sleep dropping in, putting his foot on the bar. And Biggins was never out the place. He'd always bring round the leading ladies, and you'd always get the panto cast. He'd often come round in full drag. The one night he couldn't get in the door because he got a wig with a globe that turned.
And it was sort of midnight or after that, and the phone rang. And it was a friend of mine said, "Do you want to get up here, Bernard?" I said, "Why?" He says, "The whole of the Doyley Cart Opera Company are here." I said, "You're joking." And he says, "Hang on." And this voice came on and says, "Hello, Bernard." And I said, "Who's that?" And he said, "This is John Reid." And I nearly fell off my chair because I'm a great Gilbert and Sullivan fan. And it was the whole of the Doyley Cart. So I got out of bed, dressed, and went up
to the
Nightingale to meet all these wonderful people and hear them singing in our little club.
Lionel Blair, Wayne Sleep used to be in ever such a lot. Cilla Black came in. Yeah, I met Cilla a few times over the years. Just an array of artists. Sue Pollard as well, with Les Dennis, they used to come in.
There were characters. You'd often get the characters in very early because they were quite shy. And there was one guy, Phil I think his name was, he used to come in and dance in full George Michael Faith dress. And he would dance like 5-star, which was a very elaborate, lots of spins, lots of kicks, bit Michael Jackson-like. And I lost count the amount of times he fell over, but just picked himself back up and carried on. We called him 2-star, which I think is quite cruel, but necessary. He was a decent guy, nice guy.
Every year they used to have what was called a members party night, and you could only go if you were a fully paid member or you were working. And it was a night of complete and utter debauchery. I've never seen anything like it before. The manager at the time, George Bancroft, who was a towering figure during his tenure, used to walk around with a pair of white gloves on and brush his fingers across the top of the door to make sure the staff had cleaned it properly.
I was terrified of
Yeah, he was terrifying, but great fun. And he used to organise these members' party nights, and he used to fill huge dustbins full of all of the alcohol that had gone out of date or that they couldn't get rid of, and create this Nightingale members punch that all the topless waiters used to hand out, and we used to get absolutely slaughtered. And I remember this male stripper called Tony T coming on with these leathers on a motorbike onto the dance floor, and they'd erected these 2 showers on the stage, and all of the strippers would start bollock naked, and of course all these people that you used to go out with would go up onto the stage, start soaping the strippers off, and before you knew it, you know, the show carried on in the dressing room afterwards. But they were legendary. Would we do something like that now? Yes, if we could get away with it. But you know,
I wouldn't possibly, David. I think it's absolutely disgusting.
But they were great times, and great people, and great characters.
And we used to do curly fries and food deals, and they were always trying to sort of get more people to come in by increasing the amount of curly fries you could get.
I had friends that were gay at the time. I was still not out. And they rang me excitedly the next day. "You'll never guess who was in. You know that new artist from America? She's doing the tour." She came in with her brother and a backing dancer. Madonna came to the Nightingale.
He was legendary, groundbreaking, just Tony DeVee. who was actually a real, what we would call in those days a sort of clone. You know, he was short cropped hair, had a, you know, good physique, moustache, was a man's man. I remember him coming out of the ceiling on a swing, sat on a swing, wearing this huge frock, this bright pink frock, but still with his moustache. And we used to call him Mavis, so it was Mavis DeVee coming out of the ceiling in the Nightingale, swinging on this swing, comparing this staff show that all of the staff had to be in. And I just remember standing there thinking, what the fuck is going on? What the hell am I doing in this club?
But I also worked behind the DJ doing the lights as well. So there was this long keyboard, and each key on the piano worked a light, all of the smoke machines. So I thought I was so cool. I had no idea which key belonged to which light. I knew where the smoke machine was, and I was infamous for just filling the place with smoke and then having this twizzly light and everything going off. And I just used to be behind Andy Farley playing this as though I was a Liberace, thinking I was so cool.
We often used to put poppers in the smoke machine as well. So you'd be dancing away to some high energy music with all the boys on the dance floor, and then all of a sudden this Katie would obviously be there with her pressing her things. And then the whole air would be full of poppers as well.
As I mentioned earlier, I walked in and there were a lot of guys dressed like Freddie Mercury. They all had big moustaches, short hair and check shirts. Very butch, very obviously gay because of Freddie Mercury.
And then unfortunately along came AIDS, which changed the game really. We all knew what was going on and we all knew that we needed each other. It wasn't a pretty time, and by early 90s, when I was full-time DJing, you'd see people come in, you'd know they were unwell, you'd not see them again. It was a turnaround of weeks from the moment they knew they were poorly to the moment they went.
I did lose a few friends during that. I think gay men stopped looking so obviously gay then because there was a social stigma, unfortunately, attached to it. So gay men wanted to blend in a bit more.
So it was a great dark cloud that hung over the scene, but a dark cloud that nobody really wanted to talk about. This terrible dark cloud, and to the point that if you were diagnosed as positive, and it was mainly lads again, they had nowhere to go. They would walk out the clinic, the busy clinic, they would say, you're positive for HIV, they'd go, and they'd have, who can I talk to? I have no one to talk to. Now we have, we're more sensible now, and there are charities.
There were so many people we lost. I went to probably 30 funerals, and in the end it became somewhere where we could have a giggle, because we'd be sat all together, and the guy that had died was hilarious, and he made his own tape for when it went behind the curtains, and then you'd hear this crash of a coffin falling, and you'd just sit there and think, well, what a way to go. At least there was still that humour right to the end, and we had to see it through with a bit of humour. So on a lighter note, things did improve, things got better, of course.
So I guess, yeah, clubbing got smarter, not necessarily just because of AIDS, but it did change, definitely. There was a different look from the DJ box. You know, what we were looking out of was a bit smarter than it used to be.
Lots of leather.
Leather trousers.
Flares. Trousers that were like marquees, you know.
Rosemary beads.
I seem to remember wearing a gold chain round here.
White t-shirt, leather cap, big moustache.
Lots of denim.
Tank tops.
Bright neon coloured sunglasses.
Tie-dye shirts and hair down to your arse.
I had hair bouffanted up.
Harness.
Shirts with huge collars.
Boat shoes.
Double denims.
Lots of moustache.
And like, I remember just like stepping in, and there were like 2 or 3 drag queens that she stood just by the door. And I remember being like, what on earth is this place?
Dear, oh dear.
Some days I feel I've got to nip away, I've got to slip away to the Nightingale Club on Kent Street.
The original entrance actually was just behind me. This whole slanted bit where the DJ is used to be big glass doors and a big glass frontage. And here, where I'm sat right now, would have been the stage. And we had some major acts. On the opening night, we had Let Loose and Pam St Clement from EastEnders, who came and cut the ribbon. December 1995.
But it was a good night. It was a frightening night because it was a massive, massive place compared to what we were used to. Capacity here in excess of 2,000. We were used to 400 odd.
The one in Thorpe Street, it got to the point where when it had rained, we'd have to put buckets out under things, and it got paint on top of paint on top of paint. So obviously the club was getting smaller and smaller and smaller the more we decorated it. So all of a sudden we'd come to this brand new venue that was all like the sort of the bee's knees, and it was exciting.
Belinda Carlisle would do a concert and then she'd come down here and have a night out. Jimmy Somerville would travel up from London. Fine Young Cannibals would be here. Just so many. James Dreyfus, Graham Norton, so many celebrities. Sir Ian McKellen.
When it moved from Thorpe Street to this building, it was took on a journey to become more commercial.
Yes, 100%.
And it started having artists, and it was, you know, they had an ambition to make it a mainstream club, and I suppose that collided with society's ambition for equality. So it did open the doors, and it become far more less identifiable, in my view, as an gay LGBT club. For our community, it was much broader, and I think what we've tried to do is to reclaim it, and we've done that. We haven't done that, they've done it. And I think it now feels, for me, and I think you probably feel the same, David, it feels like it did 30 years ago, because it's their club again.
Yeah. When I started, I think that I sort of come in and it was just fit that gay stereotype that everyone thought it was. It was like a muscly guy on the poster, and you know, it was just like muscly white dancers, and there was like no girls or anything like that. You know, like, I'm not saying it was awful or anything like that, but it's all about progression, isn't it? So I think there's more work to do, but this is slowly becoming a venue now that does mirror the actual queer community now as it is.
For me, I think there's been like a huge shift in the past 5 years. I think part of it has to do with like the sort of drag race era and like the visibility of queer people in media. I think it's important about making sure that everyone feels visible in a space like the Nightingale, and I think we really try to do that, and I think I'd say we succeed. There is a wider like spectrum of queer performers, and they're now being given a platform, and I think that visibility then reflects into the clients, and they come in and they see different people being represented on stage and being celebrated and being put on these podiums, and they can see some of themselves in these performers.
And you look around, there's all these different kinds of people, different ages, different cultures, different backgrounds, and everybody united with people going, come on in, let's dance.
I feel like events are being more creative now, which is really cool. The DJs are amazing. I can definitely say that they do a killer job here, they really do.
I don't know any other gay scenes around the country that offer that sort of music. And I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I am the best indie DJ ever. Got that on camera.
To look people from the outside looking in, this is just a nightclub, but to thousands of young people, this isn't just a nightclub, this is the only place they can go to.
Speaking and listening to some of the older generation that were prior to us, they thrive on the fact that it was always that safe haven, it was always that place for people to go to associate with people that were like-minded. And speaking to the younger generation now that are a lot younger than what we are, please. Even they still look at it as that sort of thing. So it's nice that we've somehow managed to keep that legacy going of that original basis of what I think the Gale was first created for.
It's made me focus on making sure that the future of visibly queer people in these venues is protected, and that everyone that steps in here feels represented and accepted. And I think that's something that everyone should aspire to anyway. But I think if the Nightingales done that for me, I'm sure it can do that for anyone.
There will always be a desire for queer venues.
You need clubs like this because we still need that safe, inclusive space where we know we can just go out and have a good time without worrying about anything. The only thing we need to worry about is what my bank balance is going to look like the next day. That's all you need to be worrying about. You don't need to worry about anything else.
We still need the gale, we still need the gay scene, we have to have that. We have to have
Because
the
it
safe spaces for people coming out.
These clubs need to exist. They need to exist because there are still people out there who aren't safe.
Because we needed somewhere to meet other people and enjoy ourselves without letting our hair down, without inhibition. But as soon as you got outside, straight face on again.
When I was finding myself, it literally, like, I broke out of that barrier and I was able to just be unapologetically who I am. So it's really important to have venues like that because there's so many queer people that they probably wouldn't have been the point they are in their life if they've never been to places like this to make them think, you know what, I'm actually okay being myself. I'm not gonna hide who I am. So it's really important.
It's given me a space to show my art, to meet new people, to make a whole change in people's lives. And I think we've got to a point where most of those fights have been won in a way where it's a lot more accepted. So now we have to think of the youth. What are they fighting for? Do you know, are they fighting for Black Lives Matter, or are they fighting for the environment? Are we? Do you know what I mean? It's the fights that we're gonna have to face. So the Gale and the scene as a whole needs to sort of recognise that and say, okay, let's focus on that type of fight. So I'm with them on that, and I'm like, okay, let's go.
I've got a deep love for the venue. I'd say that she's part of me. That's who I class myself as. I'm DJ Corey from the Nightingale. There's just something about it. One of the directors once described her as she who must be obeyed. And that's kind of what it's like. And you'll find a lot of people that work here do go the extra mile because it's part of our heritage. It's part of who we are. All of a sudden we found this place where we could be who we wanted to be. We didn't have to hide anymore. It was accepting, and it's evolving all the time as well. It's keeping me young. It keeps changing my ideas of what the LGBT community is. I'm proud to be part of the LGBT community because of the way the Nightingale embraces every little bit of it.
If the Nightingale provides an opportunity now for somebody young, just coming out, getting on the bus, and they've got this sense of excitement in them now that I felt in 1989, job done.
The Gale is a gift to people who want to achieve and be accepted and be whatever they want to be, and that's the gift that the Gale's got, and that will never change.
If it's going for 50 years strong, we should be very happy and proud of how far it's come and try to help it to even go further, if anything.
The Nightingale has gone through both politically, in society and in its own history, massive change, pivotal moments. It nearly didn't survive, let's not forget. But I think what's key, talking about its future for me, it actually really doesn't matter which building the Nightingale occupies. As long as the Nightingale exists, and as long as the Nightingale continues to evolve, and like I said earlier, if it looks distinctly different in 10 years' time from what it does today, I think, well, for me, the Nightingale is as much a part of Birmingham's heritage and history as the Post Office Tower, as the Town Hall. It's fundamental to Birmingham's history, and particularly to its LGBTQ history. And I just hope that for as long as we've got the inclination and the will, that we're part of it.
I believe that the Nightingale might be the longest standing gay club in the world because we started in '69. Legally, 67 we turned, the law was repealed, wasn't it? So I don't know of any clubs still running as a gay outfit, LGBTQ plus inclusive, and run for that length of time. So I challenge anyone to say we are not the longest running in the world, because we are!
Yes. You have been challenged.